kicking, never quitting. Focus sharp like a blade that's hitting. From white belt dreams to the master flow, Paul Coffey's got the mic, now the stories grow. Technique entails discipline and fire. Each guest brings truth to inspire. Keep kicking, step into your power. Keep kicking, moment to the hour. Every strike, every fall, every rise, it's a journey through a warrior's eyes. Old school, new school, all styles blend. From the mat to the mic, where the arts ascend. Philosophy deep, but the vibe stays tight. Martial minds meeting in the podcast light. Keep kicking, step into your power. Keep kicking, moment to the hour. Every strike, every fall, every rise, it's a journey through a warrior's eyes. Keep kicking. Keep kicking. Paul Coffey leads and the journey begins. Paul Coffey leads and the journey begins. Technique entails discipline and fire. Each guest brings truth to inspire. Keep kicking, step into your power. Keep kicking, moment to the hour. Every strike, every fall, every rise, it's a journey through a warrior's eyes. Keep kicking. Keep kicking. Paul Coffey leads and the journey begins.
Hello, everyone, and once again, Keep Kicking, martial arts podcast where I have martial conversations with my martial arts friends. Today, I sit down with Julio. Julio, you want to introduce yourself to people?
Sure, my name's Julio Rivera. I'm a martial artist from New York City and author. My most recent book is called Internal Jiu Jitsu, Conquering Mind and Body Resistance by Giving Way. And my teaching doesn't just deal with the physical aspect of martial arts. Like most of us who teach students, I want them to be well-rounded human beings. And I specifically like to focus on how their trauma could affect their responses and their reactions, and how the trauma of other people that they're confronted with may be affecting the situation, to give them a better idea of how outside circumstances may be coming into play, even though they may not be aware of them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I was doing my podcast, and I have a student of mine who listens to my stuff, and then she decided to go look for other martial arts podcasts and found you and just shared that one of your podcasts that you've been interviewed on. And that's how I got introduced to you. I have read not that book, but your first book. I assume it's your first book.
Yeah.
And so that one's on the list to read for sure.
Okay.
I just want to know techniques that we use. You know, I'll share some of what I use, and hopefully that you could share some of what you use to create that culture within the space that is safe and inviting for those that are individuals. So do you have anything like that pops immediately?
Well, as far as techniques, one of the priorities is teaching the pause, what I call the pause. And that's just, that has to do with training, and it also has to do with recognizing your trauma. When you're confronted by an obstacle or an adversary or a situation that triggers you, you have to take a moment to ask yourself the question, where is this response coming from? Where is this immediate reaction coming from? And that has to happen instantaneously, obviously, in order for it to fit into real life. So as you become a more adept martial artist, that time for that pause becomes shorter and shorter, and you start to recognize things sooner and sooner. And that dictates how you're going to respond from there. Just like with a judo technique, if you respond too quickly, then you're not going to be, you're not going to have the right timing. If you wait too long, then you've lost the opportunity. And it's the same with recognizing your triggers. As soon as you feel yourself go click, you have to ask yourself the question right away. And you have to be honest with yourself. Am I reacting to something that happened 10, 20, 15 years ago? Or am I in this moment right now dealing with this person and this situation? Should I really be this angry, or is this anger covering up something else? So many of our issues can be diffused if we take that pause.
Absolutely. And that pause can also make us not make hasty decisions.
Yeah.
And a lot of mistake happens in the haste. I like that. I do a lot of different things that, as far as self-defense is concerned, I don't use the term self-defense. First of all, I use self-preservation instead of self-defense. And I've done that because I teach a lot of people that are more on a non-violent side. And if you've watched any of my podcasts, you've probably heard the difficult question, but I'm framing it a little differently for you. And the difficult question is, how do you train a nonviolent person to speak the language of violence when it's necessary? But so as a victim, one of two things can become reality. And one of the realities is that somebody becomes like me, acceptable with violence, acceptable with dealing, giving, receiving, sadistic or masochistic, as I've labeled it. But some people become nonviolent. They move away from the violence. They didn't like the way it felt, so they kind of shut down to the idea of it. And I was teaching a class, and I had one of my nonviolent friends ask, how does a martial artist do it? And so I kind of said, well, we have an on and off switch. And Julio might be in front of me as my friend, and we're having a conversation. And then when it's time to roll or do our practice, it's not Julio. The light switch has changed, and now it's just a body. And this person said that's a lot like dehumanizing somebody to make them a victim, and we don't want to do that.
That's interesting.
So the question is, how are we navigating that? What are we doing for that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more about the switch thing. And that's something that I, whenever I talk to people about, I call it self-empowerment rather than self-defense. When I talk to people about it, I tell them that they have to be okay with flipping that switch and all of a sudden being able to do whatever is necessary to be safe. I smiled when I first heard you ask that question in another podcast, because I used to teach Krav Maga. And when I first got to the academy where I was teaching, the students had become accustomed to training in a way that was in no way conducive to reality, right? So they would punch like this, and they would act like, that their opponent, like literally like this. And I would just the first day I just stared with my eyes like this open, and just suddenly stopped everyone and said, no, this is not what's gonna happen. This is not gonna do anything. Please, you're gonna get yourselves killed, And these people are super passive professionals, and they've never had a fight before, they've never had a confrontation before. They don't know what that's like, And for me, growing up where I grew up, when I first heard someone tell me they'd never had a fight before, I couldn't believe it. I was in shock, because to me it was like, well, that's just what you do. You fight. Someone steps on your sneakers, you have a fight. Someone looks at you the wrong way, you have a fight. So that amazed me. But those were the people that I was teaching, and Krav Maga seems to attract a lot of people like that. They want to be safe on the street. They're not thinking about sport. They've never done combat sports before, so they've never dealt with someone resisting them while they were fighting. They've only seen it in movies. So they were playing martial artists. They were pretending, and that's always going to get somebody hurt. So I had to first explain to them, look, you have to be okay with striking the person holding the pad. At the very least, they're holding a pad. You can strike them hard. Don't worry, When it came time to spar, look, it's okay. At least hit to the body so you can feel like you're getting hit. Don't just wave at the air. And when I do workshops, it's even worse, because those people are just people off the street, and they're not martial artists at all. They're not even pretending to be. And most of them won't even use their voices to protect themselves. They're even afraid of that. So if you can't use your voice to protect yourself, how in the world are you going to convince yourself to punch somebody or kick somebody? Because that's so intrusive. You're going into someone else's space, and because of that, they're in your space all of a sudden. So you've got to be okay with invading space and having your space invaded, and most people are not. So I ask them to ask themselves the honest question, can I can I do whatever it takes to defend myself and get home safe to my family? If the answer is no, then you have to reevaluate and kind of understand why that is. And there are some things you have to put aside, like the idea that you can't be a good person and be able to defend yourself and stand up for yourself, because those two things, they're not mutually exclusive.
So another one of the things that I do is when I'm teaching, I call them self-defense clinics. I don't do workshops. I do like a reoccurring class with the idea of bringing them in as frequently as possible. And I have my senior students, they come and they do crisis intervention techniques while the other new students are learning how to defend themselves, how to navigate those situations. And I'm bringing this up because you brought about space, and I think space is so integral to this conversation. But I have my students work on what techniques do they have that they could remove the threat from the other person. Like, let's say somebody's against a wall being choked. How do you remove the choker? And our natural instinct is, there's two people here, insert ourselves into that space in between. But when you do that, you encroach into the space of the person who's already been attacked. So you're adding to the trauma. So then it becomes like maybe we sweep a arm and pull hip and move them away from the situation. I think that's interesting. I wanted your perspective on that. And then the second thing that I'll say before I turn the floor back over is you're a Jiu-Jitsu guy, and it's my fundamental belief that Jiu-Jitsu is one of the best arts for those individuals, because they're getting used to contact. They're getting used to a little bit of pressure. They're understanding pressure equals pain, but it's temporary. And I think those things are instrumental. But I want your take on this.
Yeah. As far as the close proximity in jiu-jitsu, I think, I have one client who, when he first started training with me, we were just doing kickboxing and MMA and Krav Maga stuff. We weren't doing much jiu-jitsu. We were just doing some stand-up grappling. And one of the reasons was that he was very claustrophobic, and he felt like having someone on top of him would just suffocate him. His brother actually had to leave jiu-jitsu because of the same reason. He had really bad claustrophobia. So it took some time for him to get comfortable with me, and little by little we would add some groundwork to the sessions. And at first he'd have to stop and kind of catch his breath. And then as time went on, he would start to push through a little bit. And then after the session, you could see the anxiety come out. But now it's gotten to the point where he's really doing a great job controlling his breathing, and he's focusing, and he's not letting himself become overwhelmed by his surroundings, essentially by what's going on in his life in that moment. It's not getting to him to the point where he's thinking irrationally, which is, of course, our goal for all our students. So I go into a situation where someone is not comfortable with that at first, with the knowledge that they can definitely break through, because I've seen it so much with jujitsu. And it's so obvious when it happens in that martial art. Sometimes you can't see the internal changes that are happening with someone with their training, but with jujitsu, you definitely you can. There's an amazing amount of confidence that comes from being able to conquer something like that. As far as like what they can do to help in a situation, or to help diffuse a situation that's happening between two other people, unfortunately, with what's happening today, there's even more talk about interjecting into something that's going on between two other parties. It's I'm bipolar, and when I'm in a hypomanic episode, I become like superhuman. So I've jumped into a lot of dangerous situations to defend other people when if I wasn't symptomatic at the time, I might not have jumped in because it was a really dangerous possibility of me getting killed, you know. But we have to decide, you know, is that person who's in danger, are they being taken advantage of because they're weak? And do they have no other option but to be saved by someone else in that moment? And if we have the capability to do that, I think it's our duty as humans to jump in and try to do it. And sometimes that means risking your own safety. Whether we're trained or not, we're going to jump in to defend our loved ones one way or another, you
Absolutely.
know? And I think training is huge, of course, and you have a much bigger advantage if you have training. But sometimes there's something that comes out of you when you want to defend someone else that, you know, it doesn't come from training, it comes from somewhere else. You know, it's this almost superhuman strength that you get.
The inner lion.
Yeah, yeah, it comes
Yeah.
out to protect its cubs, right? So I think learning diffusing skills, I think being more aware of your trauma and the trauma of other people will help you kind of read situations much better and
Mm.
help de-escalate a situation verbally because you'll be watching from the outside too, so you'll probably have a better perspective than the two parties involved. So if you can kind of tune into where both of them are coming from, sometimes you can find that common ground for both people.
That's a great answer. And it goes back to your first answer, just the stillness. Just so you said something that not very many martial artists have said, or martial arts instructors have said, and that is that you have to gain their trust. And I really wish that more instructors would say that, would lead with that thought. What do you do to gain your students' trust?
That's another great thing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that when you roll with someone, their life is in your hands, especially when you're way better than them. Your life is in my hands because I could kill you at any moment, right? That's the reality of it. And each time you tap from a choke, you're acknowledging that. So I'm letting go over and over again. At some point, you're going to trust me, you know? And even when it comes to like being challenged, sometimes in other martial arts, you know, I've had people challenge me early on in my career, students challenge me. And when you're kickboxing, you can't go ahead and beat up that student, beat the hell out of them. And you're no way, you can't do that. You know, I mean, you couldn't do it 20 years ago, let alone today. So, but with jujitsu, it's different. I can maul you over and over again and tap you over and over again. So if you ever challenge what I'm teaching you, it's easy for me to show you that it works. So I can gain your respect that way too, you know? So, and this particular student, he's one of these guys that likes to see that it works. Not in a messed up way, but you know, you can kind of see he has that question. So whenever I show him that it works with resistance, with maximum resistance, then again, I've gained his trust. And that was imperative with him because he had to know that what he was putting in work to learn was worth it.
Realize that I'm now 20 minutes in and I'm failed at one of the things I've been trying to ask everybody that I sit down with early in the episode. If there's somebody that's watching this that is not done martial arts, but they're thinking about it, maybe they've been Googling about martial arts and this came into their feed in some capacity. What advice can you give to that person that's thinking about it but not done it yet?
Explore. Check out a bunch of different places, a bunch of different styles, see what resonates with you, see what speaks to you. Decide if you're interested in practicality or if you're interested more in the artistic side of things. Nothing wrong with it either way, but you know, if you want to learn practical self-protection, then you have to veer toward a certain style of martial art. And it's just reality. We don't have to really guess anymore because the UFC has been popular for, you know, I don't even know now, 30 years, maybe. It's been so long. So we know what works and what doesn't work. And we know that, you know, we've got enough videos of real street fights to see what works in street fights. So there's really no excuse for not doing your research and finding the right spot for you. So take your time, and don't ignore if you get a bad vibe at a place. If you go to check out a place and you just something in you tells you it's not the right spot for you, even if the credentials seem amazing, that's not the place for you. You have to feel good wherever you're going to train. Try the place out. Yeah, and remember that you're going to be with these people a lot, so you should probably like them at least a little.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we'll shift back. What do you think the average martial arts school does incorrectly for creating an environment that is welcoming for those that are traumatized?
I can give you an example actually of something that happened last week. And this instructor's a great guy. He's an amazing instructor, but I had a friend, an old student, reach out and say, hey, a student of mine is going to be exploring different schools and he's going to stop by where you train because I told him you're there and he's going to check it out. I said, okay, great. I'll be there tonight at this time. And so I went over there and I saw the kid sitting down watching the class with his dad. And I went over and I spoke to him and the instructor hadn't come over to talk to him. So the kid was sitting there the entire class and there was no immediate connection made with the school. He was essentially being ignored. Not that it was done on purpose, but he was being ignored. So right away, it's not an inviting atmosphere for someone who has maybe gone through abandonment in the past, maybe just doesn't feel acknowledged in the world. Many people who are depressed, that isolation, part of that is that they feel like they're unseen and unheard. So there could be a whole host of things that are triggering that person because you didn't come over and talk to them. And it just turned out that it was a huge class. It was kind of a madhouse. He was there by himself and he couldn't break away. And by the time he looked, the kid, wasn't there anymore. But that's the kind of thing that can make someone's decision for them right away, and like, I doubt that he'll ever come back because I could tell from his expression that he felt a little bit lost in there. Schools are intimidating. Even if you've been to one, if you go to a different one, it's still intimidating. It's a different scene, it's not your home turf. So yeah, you have to be inviting, you have to be friendly, you have to put someone at ease so that they don't feel like they have to pretend when they're in front of you. Because if their ego is with them from the beginning and they feel like they have to have a facade, they're not going to let go enough to learn everything they should be learning, and they're not going to get a full grasp of the techniques because they're going to be protecting themselves while they're learning. So again, that goes back to building that trust with the person, and that has to happen right away, in my opinion. Yeah. I've had opportunities to regain people's trust after, but it's so much harder to do that than just right out of the gate, making that connection.
Right. Yeah. Running a martial arts school is not easy. Like I'm not coming at people like you're doing this wrong. I just want us to have a stronger intention behind some of the things that we're doing. Because I think that intention will redirect the ship, so to speak.
Mm. Yeah.
I have always led, not always. Since I was 18, I have led with my story. And so my students, since I was 18, know about my trauma. Maybe not all the nasty details, but they know the basics. And for me, I have found that it helps build a stronger connection to those individuals that are traumatized and that have, shared their stories with me and expressed that this is the problem. When I was 18, I had one woman who had been with us like maybe a year, and she was struggling with the technique in class and in tears just busted out of the dojo and was sitting in her car. And I went to her and like sort of counsel, talk to her. How are you doing? What's going on? Can after the class clears out, can you come back in and I can work with you one-on-one on those things? And that was when she shared with me. She's like, in 9 years, I've been to 7 schools, and this is the only one that I feel comfortable with. I started my martial arts journey after being attacked in a parking garage. And that was the switch where I was like, I need this to tell people. But I told her in that moment, we broke down and had a cry, and I helped her out. She made it to black belt. She
Oh, wow.
since moved. Yeah, she's since moved and is at a different school. But I want to know, do you lead with your story in the dojo? How have you seen that it helps or forms your club, your people?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed in 2010, and I'd been in a super deep depression for a couple of years, and then I was fluctuating. I didn't know I was bipolar, so my life seemed perfect, but I was so incredibly depressed. And it got to the point where I was so depressed I couldn't hide it from my students. I had another student, actually my first student ever, who also dealt with depression. So whenever he knew that I was having a tough time, he would kind of jump in and cover the class for me. So he was a huge help. So, but a lot of my other students, including a lot of the adults, saw me as a father figure, and seeing me hurt emotionally was a lot for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it started to affect the business. They didn't want to see me as having a chink in my armor. So when I started to talk about it more, people were afraid, like the people that worked for me and my wife at the time, and they thought that it was going to be bad for business for me to talk about my mental health struggles. But the way I saw it was, especially once I got help and I got medicated and all of a sudden I was stable,
Mm-hmm.
it was my job with a platform to scream about this stuff as loud as I could, because I knew everybody was dealing with it, and I knew how hard life could be, and I didn't want anyone to go through what I was going through. So how could I not talk about it? That kind of started the downfall of my school, I think. Yeah, I ended up selling in 2018, a year later, and because I got divorced, but a lot of it was, oh, my me being so vocal about mental health and anxiety, and for half the school it was like, oh my god, thank god he's talking about this stuff, and the other half were just, they're scared about seeing it in themselves, so they don't even want to talk about it. So I think some of those people, I freaked out a bit, but I certainly don't regret it. I think
Mm-hmm.
absolutely I lead with my story today. Because to me, there's nothing more important than mental health. There's no issue greater, and martial arts should be a pathway for you to understand yourself emotionally, mentally, physically, in every kind of way. So if we just focus on the physical side, we're ignoring so much of the picture. Yeah, so my story definitely is up front when I teach.
Yeah, I don't know if you know who Hatsume is. He's the last living practitioner of Budo Taijutsu, which means that he was an assassin for the Japanese government. And the Japanese government's like, we're not doing that anymore. Here's some money. You can open up a school.
Wow.
And so he teaches, and he says, when I teach martial arts, I teach men to control demons. Sometimes the demon's in front of you, sometimes it's within you. And that is leading my charge, that quote. I think if you speaking to your mental health ended up leading to you having to sell the school, maybe it just meant that group needed to move on, needed to go to the next group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. Most of them ended up going. The black belt that taught for me, who was my first black belt, he ended up opening a place. So most of them ended up with him, which, I mean, it's nice to see them all together and kind of getting what they need from each other, And I can certainly, I can look back and see how Some people were confused about the way I was behaving, you know? After being depressed for so long, suddenly being so enthusiastic about spreading this message, you know? Yeah, I can totally understand. And some of my reactions when I was symptomatic, especially, you know, my reactions were over the top, and that would trigger other people. Like there were people at my school who dealt with trauma themselves. And if I lost control for any reason or whatever, it would bring out stuff in them, and I would be confused because they were overreacting in my eyes. But it wasn't an overreaction because they weren't reacting to me. They were reacting to their dad, you know, 20 years ago. At the time, I didn't see that. But yeah, the last couple of years with me being so symptomatic and stuff, it taught me a lot about relating to other people. And I can look back now and understand why people did what they did toward the end of the school, and what it was about their past that made them react the way they did, you know. And because of that, I was able to forgive anyone who I perceived did me wrong, you know. Yeah, I mean, everyone has their story, and in their story is all their trauma, and that trauma is informing everything that they do.
Mhm.
So, yeah, got to be aware of that.
What are a couple of techniques or philosophies that you think anybody that is dealing with trauma should use or adopt to help them process?
I think fearlessly confronting the memories that are holding you back is, you
You
know,
say the scary stuff.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not. If it were pleasant, you wouldn't have, you know, repressed it. If it were pleasant, like for me, the major part of my trauma for me was when I witnessed a murder when I was around 8 years old, and all these years that I would think about it, I could never remember. For some reason, I could never remember the feeling. Like I couldn't. I could remember seeing it. I could remember, but I couldn't remember the feeling. And I say to myself, God, I must have been so scared. Why can't I remember? But in that moment when I was witnessing that murder, you know, I left my little body so that I didn't have to deal with those emotions, you know, to protect myself. That fear, I couldn't face it at the time. But when I became older and I processed those memories and those emotions, I could suddenly feel the kind of fear that I had in that moment, that intensity of the fear, you know, um, and of living with the murderer for years after that because he didn't go to jail, so he kept living in our building, and I would see him every day, and it was like, you know, I I, I think back to that now, and God, I must have been terrified every single day walking by him, you know. Mm, But again, you know, as a kid, you push that stuff down because you just can't handle it. You can't handle the reality of it. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of in talking about it now, I'm emotionally, I'm feeling the
Yeah.
fear. You know, I'm feeling the tension. I feel my hands getting clammy, and and I'm 50 years old now. That was a long time ago. You know, I should be over it, but I'm not.
It takes as long as it takes, you know.
Yeah.
My Zen master says that we shouldn't equate healing with time, and instead we should equate healing with space. And in doing that, if you think about it, like the time might be this, but the space is this because you haven't looked at it, you know? But you can
Yeah.
look at it, you can take a deep breath, you can reassure yourself you're safe now, and you add a little bit of space,
Hey.
you
Yeah,
know?
that's awesome.
Like I don't know if you actually watched the episode where I was interviewed that I sent you or not. Okay. I'm currently sitting in that house where all that happened.
Mm,
I purchased that house last year and I'm in the process of renovating it. And it is a lot, right? But I purchased the house and the first thing I did is go into the basement and rip those walls out. And so then those walls aren't built in a labyrinth that scared the 10-year-old me. And it's an open basement, and it's clean, and it's fresh, and it's mine.
Wow.
And I think that adds space. And I think everything that you could do in that regard adds more space and more space. I'm not healed. I'm still
Yeah.
healing, but it takes time. What do you think the average martial arts practitioner neglects in their own practice?
One of my biggest pet peeves, and one of the things that I saw the biggest issues with, again, going back to that Krav Maga school in particular, was footwork
Mm,
and the importance of rhythm. Yeah, I would do like an entire class where we're just talking about footwork and how to move and moving gracefully. And there's so much you can tell about someone in the way that they move, in the way their feet move. Are they on their toes? Are they on their heels? Do they lean to one side? Are they stiff when they walk? Do their hips move? I mean, there's so much you can see about how they're going to perform as a martial artist. And I think there's the rhythm is where the artistry is. And I think people miss that part of it. So I think connecting more with that is what's missing.
I'm going to call out a couple of people because I've interviewed more than one capoeista, and you all didn't say rhythm. It's a good answer. If you could give every martial arts practitioner one thing, thought, concept, philosophy, technique, what would it be?
Heart, yeah.
I think that's what we neglect more than anything. We're good at the kick and the punch.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a factor. You can't, you can train it for sure. People say you can't teach heart, but if you push yourself enough times, it starts to expand for sure. And you're able to get through things that you didn't imagine you could get through before. And in so many situations, it's not going to be skill that saves you. It's going to be heart. It's going to be, can you outlast the other person? Yeah. So heart is what I wish I could give.
I don't know that you can teach it, but you can lead in that direction.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. What other thoughts do we have on trauma? What are we missing in relation to trauma?
I think that there's still a tendency for people to dismiss it and dismiss the impact of it, which is sad considering how much more it's talked about. But people still want to be tough. They want to put on, this persona as if nothing bothers them, or, they want to prove that they can overcome anything. And that's absolutely, you should want to overcome it, but not by ignoring it, not by never confronting it, because you're not overcoming it. Like you said, you're not creating that space. You're only getting the distance of time, and that's not going to do it. Unfortunately, I see it in my parents. They're in their 70s, and they have so much trauma that they've never confronted. Therefore, they have not changed in 70 years. They're still dealing with the same issues, having the same fights, and I can't say that they're content because of their choices, their choice to do that. They're not, but I don't think they put enough credence in the idea that trauma is really messing with your quality of life, and they just assume this is what life is. And trauma will do that to you. It'll convince you that you're supposed to be in that, that pattern of depression and anxiety all the time, but it doesn't have to be that way.
It's indeed have to be that way. I always thought it interesting that martial artists don't deal with trauma because our whole stick is about meeting the things that are difficult head on. And from somebody that's avoided and ignored trauma and has met it face to face and tried to heal, it's far more difficult to meet it face to face and try to heal, than it is to ignore it or push it down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough battle. But, the manifestation of it later, if you don't face it, is just misery and,
grief, loss.
Yeah, yeah.
So I try and keep these around an hour. What didn't I ask? What did you want to say that you would like to say?
I think one of the things I always say when I'm asked that, what else would I like to mention is just the importance of kids learning this stuff, early on.
So they don't become 70-year-olds.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, imagine if as you're confronted by stuff when you're 7 or 8 years old or 9 years old, you understand that, okay, this is a traumatic experience and I have to realize that this may make me react to things in a way that, that's bad for me. So I mean, that would just bring you to another level as a human, you know?
Right.
So yeah, teaching kids about this. I have an 11-year-old and, you know, her mother's a PhD in social work. So she's been really adamant about our daughter learning these types of things. And as have I, obviously. So I'd like to see more people kind of share this stuff with their kids and maybe talk about, I mean, I only yelled at my daughter one time when she was like, I think she was like 2.5 or something. And she was dragging this water bottle and I asked her to stop and she didn't stop. And I said, if you don't stop, I'm gonna throw it away. She didn't stop, so I took it and I threw it away and she flipped out like I've never seen anyone flip out before. I had taken this object that meant so much to her and I dumped it in a garbage can. And it was so traumatic that I haven't yelled at her since. And she's 11 now. I haven't yelled at her since, and it's worked for me. It's worked for our relationship. But that, like throwing that water bottle away, it affected her for a little while. Like I would notice her react in a certain way if she thought you were going to discard something that she had, or So yeah, no matter how young they are or how insignificant it may seem to you, it may be affecting them in this gigantic way. Some silly comment that you made to them, they may have taken it to heart, and now that's something they're going to remember forever. I can't tell you how many things like my siblings and I will remind our parents of that happened when we were kids, and they'll just deny it. Meanwhile, it's stuff that has been so traumatic for us and that we've held on to, that we've talked about in therapy, and to them it didn't even happen. So it's so I realize that's something that you have to know that's going to happen as you get older too, like with parents. They kind of rewrite history, or they'll say, like my mother told me a story about, she goes, I wanted to teach you not to touch the stove, so I turned it on and I took your hand and I held it in front to the flame, and I said, this is what's going to happen if you touch the stove, and I held your hand to the flame. And she's laughing about it, like, you think that's funny, holding your kid's hand to a flame? What's wrong with you? Are you kidding me? And she's like, what? You never touched the stove, did you? Like, oh my God. So stuff like that, like they don't even think about. But yeah,
It was a
I think
different generation.
it was a different generation for sure. Yeah.
My goodness. Where can the people find you?
On social media, I'm at Internal Jiu-Jitsu, just about everywhere. My website is internaljujitsu.com. Yeah, I do one-on-one coaching as well. My book, Internal Jiu-Jitsu, is on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, books.org, or you can get it from your local bookstore as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make sure that a link is in the show notes.
Cool.
And I can't recommend your other book enough.
Thank you. Yeah, that one I wrote while I was off meds. So one day I was up here, one day I was down, it was like it was supposed to be what my second book turned out to be. But because I was off medication and I was symptomatic the whole time, it turned into something completely different, So yeah.
I don't see an aggressive fluctuation throughout.
Well, there are chapters where I'm suicidal, and there are chapters where I'm like, I'm the greatest thing ever. So it was an interesting process to write it. Yeah.
I thank everybody that takes time to sit down with me, because I know time is such a fleeting thing that we have so very little of, and I'm very thankful for your time. I also thank people, but I'm doubling down on this, as a suicide survivor myself, as a trauma survivor myself. First of all, I'm glad that you made it through the fire as well, brother.
Thank you. Likewise.
But I thank you, because now having this conversation, you're part of my martial arts journey, whether you like it or not.
Yes.
I want to thank everybody that watched, listened, some combination of to this. I hope you guys got something out of it. I hope you guys go get his book and read it. I've actually read through once and I'm on my second read through because I read and then I read and make notes the second time. It's just what I've always done. And everybody keep kicking.